I just wanted to start off by saying congratulations on your elevation to the Deputy Prime Ministership.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And your election win.
Yeah, it was a big year last year, and it was sort of really only over the summer that I had a chance to reflect on some of that, and we've got a big job ahead as we carry on through the COVID recovery and more. So yeah, getting the chance to support Jacinda as Deputy is cool. It's really good.
Biggest win in 40 or 50 years for Labor?
At least, yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
One of the things about voting is that everybody who votes has their own set of reasons for why they vote. So when you try and make those generalisations, you have to be a little bit careful. But I do think there was a strong endorsement of the approach we've taken to COVID-19. I don't think there's any doubt about that. New Zealanders backed the elimination strategy we had, and they backed us to carry on and see that through. Part of that, and in addition to that, is Jacinda's leadership. I think people wanted leadership that they could relate to and that reflected New Zealand's values, and I think that's what Jacinda's been able to do over this period of time. And then I think, one of the things that's always been difficult for Labour parties around the world, actually, is this thing about who's good to manage the economy. And I feel like through COVID and before, actually, we had shown that we could manage the economy well, that we could spend significantly in really important areas that we needed to, child poverty and housing and a whole lot of other issues, but also kind of keep a sensible handle on the economy. So I think if you put all of those things together, and then obviously politics is politics, and the opposition were not in a good state either.
Yeah, that helps. When I left Australia, I left it the most divided I've seen it since the 2005 Cronulla race riots. And even before then, we saw the rise of the far right, which ended up contributing to the Christchurch massacre. I don't think that would have happened if there wasn't the rise of the far right in Australia. We have yearly protests over Australia Day, and now we've just had reports of white supremacists and neo-Nazis up in the Grampians burning crosses. New Zealand is not without its problems, but it's nowhere near as divided as Australia, and it's a bit more accepting of difference. What's your secret?
Yeah, it's always so hard to compare the countries, and I think your perspective's really interesting, having been there. There's a sense I get in New Zealand of there's sort of a moderation tendency in New Zealand, that we, those sort of extremes are not that common here, and even the way we do politics. So I've been an observer of Australian politics for a long time, and it's more aggressive. There's more that we have conflict in New Zealand, but it tends to have this kind of moderated sort of spirit to it, I almost feel.
Why is that?
I think it's, it's really hard to say, and I think it's to do with the whole nations that we are. I do think one of the things which New Zealanders don't recognise enough is the extent to which the process around the Treaty of Waitangi and the settlements and so on is really like a one long extended truth and reconciliation commission in New Zealand. And while we've had our ups and downs with it, and there are parts of our society who still have problems with it, it's largely become a cross-party endeavour in New Zealand. The recognition that what went wrong, a recognition that there needs to be apologies, that there needs to be compensation. And I think that process has really helped New Zealand just sort of come to terms with its past a bit more.
Yeah, we never had a treaty.
No, exactly. And this is the thing, and again, I always feel when I'm talking about this that I run the risk of putting New Zealand on a pedestal, and not, because you've just seen it in the last few days with radio talkback issues and things like that. There is still racism in New Zealand, but I do think we've created this since the mid-1980s, this process of recognising that treaty, recognising that not only were there historical wrongs, but there is a systemic situation created by all of that we have to address. For example, Māori end up in the wrong part of a lot of statistics, be they crime-related ones or poverty-related ones, which are intertwined themselves. health issues, etc. And so I just feel like we've had that conversation in a way that maybe Australia hasn't.
Do you think it's too late for treaty in Australia?
It's going to be very hard because, I would often think if New Zealand sort of had to do it again now, would we be able to do it?
The treaty by time was nowhere near perfect, but it was a start.
No, and it's still disputed and it's still there, but the conversation has got a place to be. Around the time of Kevin Rudd and saying sorry and all that, I felt like there was a momentum for something there, and I'm a little disconnected from it now to know quite a lot what happened. So I suspect a treaty is too late, but some kind of ongoing mechanism for reconciliation, I would have thought was a possibility.
Perhaps less of a revolving door of prime ministers would help with that.
Well, that certainly was an issue.
My plan is to run for the Senate in West Australia, and I've come over your way on a policy hunt. What areas of policy are you most passionate about? Because I'm keen to steal some ideas.
I'm passionate about lots, but I guess the thing that I've been working as Finance Minister, that I've been working on a lot over the last 3 years is this sense of this thing called the wellbeing approach. So this is about the way we do budgets in New Zealand and the way we measure our success. And forever, we have measured our success on GDP, on whether or not we're getting productive growth in our economy. And GDP is a perfectly fine measure, and actually, in fairness to the people who created it, they never said it should be the all-encompassing measure. It's a measure of activity in particular parts of the economy. What it definitely isn't is a measure of the quality of that activity, nor is it a measure of a whole lot of other things that we think are important. So I've set about changing the way we create our budgets, and we do it based on what we call a wellbeing framework, which itself is based on a piece of work our Treasury did on something called the Living Standards Framework, which essentially looks at our lives in four parts, the financial part of our life, but also, how we are as people, what our physical environment's like, how strong are our communities. And those four kind of pillars now are what drives both how we measure our success and what we invest in. And I'm really passionate about that as a better framework. The economy is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself.
Yeah.
And for the longest time here in Australia, I'm sure, we've looked at it as an end point. We've got it, and it isn't. The economy is there to deliver life outcomes for people. And we've got to be there for thinking about, what are the things we value. It's been fascinating for me, even among the corporate world, people are starting to kind of grasp this. And I think COVID-19 is a really good example. And actually, New Zealand, I feel like we use the wellbeing approach in the way we dealt with COVID. So we said the strongest thing we can do for our economy is actually have people healthy, and so we prioritise that. So that overall approach has been really important. Otherwise, there's a host of policy things from child wellbeing through to climate change, which I think we've started, but we've got a long way to go on.
What's Labor's goal for climate change? If you could put it in a nutshell.
The easiest thing for us is to hook it on our 2050 Paris targets.
Yeah.
So we're looking towards keeping temperature rise to 1.5 degrees or less. We have an independent climate commission which we established in the last term. Its first reports are coming out in the next few weeks actually.
Yeah. And
it says here's what you have to do in transport to get yourself to what will contribute to keeping temperature rise to less than 1.5 degrees. Here's what you've got to do in the way you regenerate electricity sector, both agriculture, etc. We have to accelerate what we're doing in all of those areas, and that means, as we announced yesterday, clean car standards. We just have to start moving away. New Zealanders and Australians love their cars and love hanging on to their cars for a really, really long time as well. So we've got to start moving the dial on all of those things. So in a nutshell, we've now got to walk the talk. We've got a set of targets in 2050 that if we don't start the change yesterday, we're not going to make it.
I'm interested in how Australia can be a better neighbour to New Zealand. Prime Minister Ardern has mentioned changes. She wants changes to the benefits Kiwis can receive in Australia, and raised concerns about deporting convicts back to New Zealand who have spent most of their lives in Australia. Why should we?
Well, in terms of the benefits, I think the thing there is about if people have made their home in Australia, if they have worked already, if they've been in work, but perhaps they're out of work. It just seems wrong and unfair that they don't get the benefits of that. And you've got the situation where people were paying into Medicare but couldn't access the benefits of it. I mean, that's just wrong at a really fundamental level. But I do think once somebody is there and they're in the society for a period of time, they should be able to be eligible for all of the things that are there. So it's just really basic fairness from my point of view. On the 501s, I mean, this is a huge challenge. A lot of it depends on what we think the outcomes are. From time to time, if someone's in another country for a short period of time, they commit a crime, I do accept that they should go back to the country they're from. The problem we had was people who had moved to Australia when they were 1 and 2 years old, being asked to be sent back when they had absolutely no connections back here. And part of that comes to what is it that we're trying to achieve in our criminal justice system. And if what we're trying to achieve is rehabilitation, then I wonder how you could conceive sending somebody back to a place where they know nobody will assist with their rehabilitation, their reintegration. So on the second of those, it's not cut and dry. There will be deportation from time to time, but you've got to be practical about it. And if someone has lived in a country for all but the first year of their lives, I just can't see how that helps anybody.
Word on the street is that Jacinda's going to call it quits after this term in office, hand over the Prime Ministership to you. I know you're going to tell me that's a party decision and you're not focused on that, but do you have leadership ambitions and can we stay in touch?
We can certainly stay in touch. I don't have leadership ambitions. I did run for the leadership of the Labour Party twice, actually.
Yeah.
And I said after the second one that I wouldn't chase it again, and I won't. And I'm really in the position now where I'm supporting Jacinda. I'd also say don't believe everything you hear on the street.
So you think she might run another term?
Yeah, well, I think it's possible. I haven't talked to her in any detail about that, but her and I and the rest of the team are committed to making New Zealand a better place. So yeah, I think that is just a rumour. It's not based on anything.
Well, I think you'd make a great Prime Minister.
It's kind of you.
I hope we can stay in touch.
Yeah, and good luck. All the best.